Hi, we are from Group 6 and we will be presenting about the procedure of building plan to obtain the Certificate of Completion and Compliance, as well as highlighting pertinent clauses in the MID contract. Firstly, we will cover some of the procedure of building plans that needs to be gone through to get the Certificate of Completion and Compliance. Some of the procedures include the submission of plans for approval, return of plan, supervision of work, plans to be signed, and scale of plans that shall be drawn. To further elaborate, submitting of plans must be submitted to the office of the local council, where a statement must be shown and the return of plan may be returned if it exceeds the ability of the submitting person. So what exactly is a principal submitting person? He is a person who takes over the duties and responsibilities of submitting building plans to a local authority for approval such as MPSJ and MPSA. The supervision needs to be carried out by a certified construction site supervisor for erection of buildings, and all plans must be signed by the submitter and the owner's agents with their full address. There are also specific scales that need to be followed based on the type of drawings, and therefore, the site plan should not be less than 1 to 1000. Key locations can be at any convenient scale. General buildings should not be less than 1 to 100. And lastly, the sketch plans for approval shall not be less than 1 to 200. Here is an example of a site plan drawing which must include the location, scale and number of lots, area of lot, north point, section number, rainwater tank, site assessing method, and also clearance dimensions. The content of floor plan mainly stated to include dimensions for building, opening such as windows, dimensions between walls, piers and stanchions, site drainage and discharge sizes, names and uses of rooms. Here are the checklist of forms for submission to local authority. And here is an example of fees for consideration plan and permit. Once the drawings have been submitted to the local authority, the MID contract comes into play. Clause 1.0 General Obligation talks about the legal responsibilities between the employer, interior designer and the contractor. For the employer, they should provide the right of access to the project site at any given time. And as for the contractor, they should complete the works and the material, goods and workmanship according to contract documents, or required by the interior designer. The safety of all temporary works shall also be the responsibility of the contractor. Designer shall provide all relevant information to the contractor, notice the employer on issues such as quality, finance and time in the contract, and most importantly using interior designer instruction in all notes and instructions. Moving on to clause 4, which talks about the importance of all works materials, goods and workmanship shall be quality required by the interior designer. Furthermore, the contractor shall assign a representative to supervise all work. Employer shall assign inspectors. Lastly, site staff shall only follow instructions authorized by the interior designer. Another important clause in the MID contract is clause 5. It talks about the variation rule. First of all, a variation is a written agreement to change the work from the agreed in the contract. Clause 5.1 states that interior designer can order or authorize any variations without violating the contract. More importantly, the interior designer may demand a variation at any time before the CCC. However, variations can create conflicts between parties involved in the contract. Here are some examples of the negative effect a variation can have. Next is the process of completion of work. The process includes tender submission, revised tender when the revisions happen, and when the tender is accepted. During commencement, the contractor must maintain ownership of the site and complete the work on schedule. If the employer takes too long to give the contractor possession, the extension of time must be granted by the interior designer. Practical completion is when the employer can actually utilize the work fully for their intended purpose, despite the minor defects. If the work is finished, the interior designer will give a certificate of partial completion, which will contain the contractor's promise to correct any flaws in a timely manner. The contractor has until the completion date to complete the interior of the building. If the contractor fails to do so, the interior designer will issue a certificate of non-completion, and the contractor shall pay the employer stated as liquidated damage in the appendix. The liquidated damage in the appendix states the estimated monetary losses that an owner will suffer if a contractor delivers a construction project late. Here is an example of the liquidated damage amount shown in the appendix of contract. After all the procedures stated before has been completed, the final step is to obtain the Certificate of Completion and Compliance, which is Form F that shall be issued by the principal submitting person that address that the aspects of buildings such as fire safety, plumbing and earthworks is well constructed and safe for occupation, and he shall accept full responsibility for CCC. Lastly, once it's submitted, the result may be approved by the local authority, rectifying the failure or non-compliance within 21 days after the receipt of notice. And these are the procedures to obtain the CCC. Thanks for listening to this presentation.